In this video, I'm going to be introducing you guys to while loops in Python. So first things first, when you want to make a while loop, you put while, and then afterwards, you put the condition. So in this case, let's put the condition, let's set 5. Let's make it simpler. Now here's the thing, we're using the variable I in this case, so we need to declare the variable I. Let's keep it at 0 for now. Well, when you have this while loop, let's say we want to print out the values of I, and then let's increment I up by 1 every single iteration of the while loop. Alright, so when we run this code, what are we expecting? Well, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 makes sense. Why is this the case? Well, let's go ahead and go and cover what's actually going on inside of the code. First, of course, we declare the variable I to be set to be equal to 0. Alright, and then next we go into this while loop. Well, the first thing that this while loop does is check this condition. Is I less than 5? Well, since I is equal to 0, starting, I will be less than 5. Okay? So, 0 is less than 5. Therefore, we can run the code inside this while loop. We run the code. First thing that the first iteration of this while loop does is print out I. Well, in this case, I was equal to 0, so we print out 0. Makes sense? Alright, next thing, we run I plus equals 1. That means we just increment I up by 1, therefore I is now equal to 1. So after the first iteration, after the first time we run this while loop, I is equal to 1. Next thing, again, we check the condition. We check the condition, I is now equal to 1 on the second loop, and then since I is equal to 1, it's still less than 5, therefore we run the code. So we run this code over again. Next, I is equal to 2, right? Every single time we iterate this while loop, I increments up by 1. I is equal to 2. Since I is equal to 2 now, 2 is still less than 5, so we can keep going, right? Run this code again, I is equal to 3. 3 is less than 5, therefore we run this code again. All right, next time we run it, 3 is equal to 4. Sorry, I is equal to 4 since we increment 3 up by 1. So I is equal to 4 now. Since 4 is still less than 5, we run this code again. Now here's the thing. On the, was it 4th iteration, 5th iteration? Doesn't matter. 5th iteration, yeah. When we run this code, I is equal to 5. So since I is equal to 5, right, we don't run the code. Since I is equal to 5, since 5 is not less than 5, right, 5 is not less than 5, 5 is equal to 5, we don't run the code here and this while loop exits. And when it exits, all it does is continue running whatever code is after it. So let's say print hello world. No, let's not print it. You have exited the while loop. So once we run this, you have exited while loop. Great. So what this does, this while loop does, in overview, is first it checks the condition, and then it runs the code. And then it checks the condition again, and then it runs the code, and checks the condition again, and then runs the code. So it just keeps checking the condition and running the code, checking the condition and running the code, until we don't meet the condition anymore, and then exits. And then it exits this while loop and just continues running whatever code is after it. Alright. Now, here's the thing that you need to watch out for. While loops are very, very prone to something we call infinite loops. So, let's say we don't have a condition. Let's say we just say while true. Alright? Now, remember about conditionals. If you didn't watch that video, I recommend that. It's my if statements video. If you already understand if statements, that's fine. But the thing about these conditionals is that they turn to booleans. So these guys, they turn to true, false statements. So what we can do is run while true. And this basically means that no matter what the condition is, you'll just keep running the while loop, right? While true, this meets the condition, true, we keep running the while loop, all right? If we click this, we're going to print out a bunch of numbers until we run out of RAM. And then it's going to, let's see, let's just stop this, okay? Let's show an example. Let's show a better example instead of printing. Let's say while true, it's going to give me an error. Okay, well, it's going to keep running infinitely, I guess. I guess it doesn't give you an error here. In VS Code, if you have an infinite loop, it'll give you an error. But this one, it'll just keep going on and on and on. But basically, what this means is that this guy doesn't have a condition to stop it. All right, and if it doesn't have a condition to stop it, it's never going to move on. Look at this little yellow underline. This code is unreachable, right? Basically, what this means is that anything inside the while loop is just going to run infinitely until you run out of RAM. Your computer has to exit the program, and then you can never run this piece of code, right? All it does is keep running the while loop over and over and over and over, and you will never be able to go past it. Now, this is something you have to watch out for. Wait, why is this not? Okay. This is something you have to watch out for, okay? Because infinite while loops are very common, especially if you just started, coding. You could make that mistake very easily, right? You forget to set a condition. So make sure you put this condition, I is less than 5, here. Now, here's the thing you can do with while loops as well. If I is equal to, let's say if I is equal to 5, we break. Now, what does this break mean? Well, break is what we call a loop controller. So a loop controller simply does the same thing as what this while true will do. Okay. Oh, sorry. What the previous condition was do. While I is less than 5, you can keep running the code. But if I equals 5 or is greater than 5 at any point, then you end the code. And what break does is just simply break out of this while loop. Basically, you don't need to set a condition inside the top of this while loop. All it does is just end the while loop and then moves on to the next thing. So let's show an example of what's going on. So we print I. If we print I, again, it does the same thing. Prints out 0 through 4, and then prints out you have exited the while loop, which means that we have exited the while loop. We managed to run the code past it. Now what's going on is, although there's no condition at the top of this while loop, there is a condition here. And this condition here is only if I is equal to 5, you break. And break just simply means exit out the loop. All right. So what's going on? Well, every single iteration, we are printing I, and then we're increasing I. And then as we increase I, eventually, I will equal to, especially if we increment I by 1, I will equal to 5. And when I is equal to 5, we break. Okay? If statements are very useful in this case, right? They can give you loop controllers. Or they can allow you to use loop controllers. Because if you put this break outside of it, you're literally just going to never run the code, right? Run it here. If we put break before we run the while loop, before any of the code in the while loop, it literally just opens the while loop, breaks out, never runs the code past it, okay? So make sure you don't put break outside of conditional or outside of your intention, right? But basically what break does, exits out the while loop, okay? This is important. Now here's the issue with this I is equal to 5, something that you might run into. If you want to have the condition while I is less than 5, you keep running the while loop. All right. If you want to mimic that condition, then you should probably make it so that if I is greater than 5, you break. Okay. Now the reason why this could be, or if I is greater than or equal to 5, let's make that more precise. But the reason why this right here is somewhat dangerous is because what if you increment I by 2? If you increment I by 2, what's going to happen? You're going to have an infinite loop. Now, what's the reason for this? Let's scroll all the way up and check out our first few inputs. Okay, I guess we can't. Computer runs faster than it could save on the terminal. But what's going on is that I, as it increments by 2, goes to 2, right? So on the first iteration, I is equal to 2. And it prints out 2. Or it prints out 0 first, and then sets I equal to 2. And then we print out 2. And then set I equal to 4. So as we keep going on and on, all we're doing is adding, I guess, all the even numbers onto I. So we're adding 2 onto I, we get 2. We add 2 again, we get 4. And we add 2 again, we get 6. Here's the thing. I never equals 5. I just never equals 5. Okay? Since I never equals 5, there is no break statement in this code. This condition right here is quite literally never met because all the numbers we picked were even. So that's why you want to put if I is greater than or equal to 5. Why is this important? Well, if you set I is greater than or equal to 5, that's when you can end the loop. Because when I is incremented up slowly and slowly up into 6 by this while loop, then that's when the code can end, because 6 is greater than or equal to 5. So we meet this condition, and then we can break. So make sure that first off, when you're using break, you actually meet the condition of the break. And second off, when you're using while loops, make sure that there is a condition in the first place, or else you're going to get an infinite loop. This code will literally never end, and you'll never move past it. You'll never be able to print out or run whatever code you want after it. There are actually more loop controllers than just break. All right, so let's increment I up by 1 again. And let's set it so that the condition is 10. Okay. And keep in mind, this just basically means whenever I is greater than 10, we exit out this while loop. And let's set another condition. If I is, let's say, equal to 3, then we continue. All right, what does continue do? Well, continue is kind of a miniature break. Okay, not really. But continue does something very nice. Now, let's go ahead and increment I up by 1 in this if statement as well. Let's show what happens. Well, when I is equal to 3, we continued, right? What does continue do? You can take a guess. We didn't even print out 3 here. So what continue does is basically run whatever code is above it, all right? And then it skips that iteration of the while loop. So you skip that turn. So we never actually get to the print part. We basically skip all the code below the continue, and then we reset the loop. So again, we check the condition, and then we run it from the top down again. All right. So this continue simply skips one iteration, moves on to the next. It is very simple. Now, here's the thing. The reason why I put this I plus equals to 1 here is for a very important reason. And the reason why is because, let's actually comment this out for now and show you what happens. If we run this code, we just print 0, 1, 2, and I think the code never ends, right? Yep, yeah, just literally never ends. The code never ends. Now, this is another example of how an infinite loop can happen. What's happening here is, as every iteration of this while loop increases I up by 1, correct? Right? That's I plus equals 1. What actually happens is, as we keep increasing, I eventually equals 3. And when I equals 3, we don't meet the condition of this break, right? 3 is not greater than or equal to 10. So we skip this if, or this if statement, this conditional, and we move on to the next. Well, since I is equal to 3, we continue. So we skip anything past the continue statement. We just skip it all right? And we rerun the code. We rerun the while loop. Again, I has not changed, right? I has not changed. We continue. Below the continue is when I changes, but I never changed, right? So again, I is still 3, and 3 is not greater than or equal to 10, so we don't meet the condition of break. And again, I is still equal to 3, so 3 is equal to 3, and we continue again. We run the code again, I is still equal to 3, and this will cause an infinite loop. Okay, so since the I just never changes, right? It will just keep continuing, keep skipping everything past this, and never running the code past it, never meeting the condition of the break. So if we run if here, we actually skip the printing of 3, and we iterate. We increment I up by 1. And you can actually put multiple of these, right? If you don't want to print out, let's say 6 in this case, then we'd set I equal to 6, and we don't print out 6, right? 5 and 7. If you don't want to print out, let's say 9, right? You can say if I is equal to 9, iterate I up by 1, and then continue, right? And we skip the print statement past it, and we don't print out 9 in this case, right? 7, 8, no 9. So continues can be very useful for, let's see, I think my Hangman project used continue. I think I showcased that in my lists video or if statement video. Doesn't matter, right? But all of these things, these continues, these breaks, you're definitely going to use them. I'm not showing you useless information. Of course, if I were to show you useless information, I'd smack myself in the face and then call myself John. But let's go ahead and talk about the last loop controller, or I guess it's not really a loop controller. All it really does is absolutely nothing. Pass. Okay. So let's say if I is equal to, let's say 3. Okay, accidentally typed in type in these rest of these numbers. But if I is equal to 3, write down pass. This just does nothing. Okay? If I is equal to 3, do absolutely nothing. And then just move on. So pass really just does nothing, okay? It literally just, like, if you put pass here in your loop, there's absolutely no difference as what is going on, right? You still print out from 0 to 9 and print out you have exited the while loop. All right. So pass just does nothing. Okay. Now, you might be thinking, when are you actually going to ever use pass? Well, when you declare a function, say definition sum, and maybe put in some parameters num1, num2, and you have nothing inside of it, but you want your code to run, right? Maybe you haven't made this function yet. All right, maybe you haven't used it, you haven't made it inside of your code yet, or maybe you made a loop, right? Like while I is less than 1 million, right? And you haven't done any code with it yet. Okay. The thing about pass is all it does is simply allow your code to run. So technically these guys do nothing right now, but all it does is allow your code to run. All right. Oh wait, while pass. Okay, this loop never ends. Never mind. Okay, don't listen to me with the while loop there. But all this does, again, does nothing, allows your code to run. If you didn't put pass here, right, then you would have an error because there's nothing inside of this function doing anything. Okay, so if you want your code to run, you want to run the rest of your code, you have a big program, you declared the functions beforehand, you made the function names, you maybe put a couple of loops here and there, but you haven't done anything with it, right? You made like a outline, but you haven't filled it out, and you want your code to run, you can simply put pass, and then you can keep going on with your day. All right. So pass could be useful in that case if you want to build an outline for your code without actually having to fill in the function yet or write code for the for functions yet, but it's really not going to be used that much. You could argue as well, you just don't write down the function name yet, don't declare the function yet, and then you won't have a problem, right? One thing I would like to state for you guys that are extremely new to coding and hasn't really developed an intuition for these things is that you can use break multiple times, right? So you can set multiple conditions, especially in the cases where you're not iterating anything and you actually have like maybe strings or more complicated conditions, right, that you want to end the while loop with. You can set break for multiple conditions. Okay, so you can set like if I is less than 20 as well, break. Okay, all right, or if I is equal to 20. Let's not say. Right, if I is equal to 20, break. Now here's the thing, you'll never reach I is equal to 20, right, break, since you're breaking if I is greater than 10 in any case, but you can set break for multiple conditions. All right, I would just like to state that explicitly. Now, last thing, just a cool feature of Python I would like to state is this else. Okay, so when we put else here, it only runs if we don't exit the while loop with the break. All right, so let's go ahead and set the condition if I is less than 10, run the code again, and we don't use break. All right. So let's set this condition back up again. Now, here's the thing with this. When we run this code, as soon as we exit the program, we just run this else statement. That's all. Basically, all this else does is only if you exit the while loop with the conditional, then you run the else. If you exit the while loop with a break, it won't run this else statement. All right, break won't run the else statement. Now, I guess there could be pros and cons to using this else, but honestly it doesn't make too much sense because you could simply have just put the print outside the while loop, and every single time the while loop ends, it would still run it, just as if you put else. So else is just a feature. Maybe there are some uses for that I don't know about. But if you found this video helpful, consider subscribing and liking the video. Thanks for watching.